Did you know ancient board games were more than just entertainment? These intricate playing fields, carved into stone or etched onto wooden slabs, held secrets, whispers of civilizations long gone, hidden strategies, and even sacred rituals. Picture this, a game board unearthed from a pharaoh's tomb, its pieces arranged not for leisure, but as a guide to the afterlife, or warriors huddled around a battlefield of black and white stones, training their minds for war without ever drawing a blade. These weren't just pastimes, they were mirrors reflecting the beliefs, fears, and ambitions of the people who played them. Today, we're stepping into a world where every move on the board tells a story. From the royal courts of Mesopotamia to the temples of ancient Egypt, board games were woven into the fabric of daily life, serving as tools for teaching, prophecy, and even conflict resolution. Imagine holding a piece from the game of feeling the weight of 4,000 years in your palm, and realizing it was once used to divine the will of the gods. Or uncovering how the Vikings carried their favorite game, Hnefatafl, across frozen seas, turning quiet moments between raids into battles of wits. These games were more than distractions, they were windows into how our ancestors saw the universe. But here's the twist, many of these games held meanings so profound they've been misunderstood for centuries. Some were tied to cosmic cycles, others to military tactics, and a few even doubled as spiritual maps. Take Senet, the Egyptian game of the dead, where players raced not just to win, but to navigate the soul's journey through the underworld. Or the Indian game of Patolli, where the roll of dice decided fates in a way that blurred the line between luck and destiny. Over the next 30 games, we'll decode these hidden layers, revealing how a simple set of rules could shape empires, influence religions, and even predict the future. So, if you've ever wondered what your favorite modern board game might say about you, get ready because the past is about to reveal just how deep the game really goes. The royal game of isn't just one of the oldest board games ever discovered. It's a time capsule from a civilization that saw the universe in every roll of the dice. Crafted around 2600 BC in the heart of Mesopotamia, this game wasn't played on some simple grid. Its board was a masterpiece of inlaid shell and lapis lazuli, divided into 20 squares adorned with rosettes, eyes, and celestial symbols. Players would race their pieces from one end to the other, but this wasn't just a test of speed or luck. The dice, shaped like elongated pyramids, held a deeper purpose. Every throw was a whisper from the gods. For centuries, the true rules of the royal game of were lost to history, buried beneath the sands of time alongside the ruins of ancient cities. That is, until Irving Finkel, a curator at the British Museum, deciphered a 4,000-year-old cuneiform tablet that revealed the game's secrets. What he uncovered was astonishing. This wasn't just a game, it was a cosmic journey. Mesopotamians believed the board mirrored the path of the soul, with each square representing a step through the heavens. Landing on a rosette wasn't just a lucky break. It was a divine blessing, a sign that the gods favored your journey. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The game wasn't just for fun, it was used in sacred rituals, a way to seek omens and divine the future. Priests would play it to interpret the will of the gods, treating each move as a message from beyond. Imagine sitting in a dimly lit temple, the flicker of oil lamps casting shadows across the board, every roll of the dice holding the weight of prophecy. Even the pieces themselves carried meaning, some shaped like birds, perhaps symbolizing the soul's flight through the afterlife. What makes the royal game of so extraordinary isn't just its age or its craftsmanship, it's the way it blurs the line between play and prayer. For the Mesopotamians, life was a delicate balance between mortal effort and celestial influence, and this game was their way of navigating that balance. It's a reminder that for our ancestors, even the simplest pastimes were woven into the fabric of the sacred. And when you hold a replica of those ancient dice today, you're not just touching a piece of history, you're holding a fragment of humanity's first attempts to understand fate itself. Now let's journey to ancient Egypt, where the game of Senet wasn't just entertainment, it was a matter of life and death. Dating back to 3100 BCE, this 30-square board game held such sacred significance that it was often buried alongside pharaohs like Tutankhamun, whose lavish set was discovered in his tomb, crafted from gleaming ebony and ivory. But Senet's true power lay in its symbolism. Each square wasn't merely a space to move a pawn, it was a step in the soul's perilous voyage through Juat, the Egyptian underworld. The rules of Senet may seem lost to time, but the clues left behind paint a vivid picture. Players would throw casting sticks or knucklebones to advance their pieces, but every move carried cosmic weight. Certain squares bore hieroglyphs representing hazards. A crocodile might force you backward, while landing on the House of Rebirth meant escaping the underworld's grip. The board itself was a microcosm of the afterlife, mirroring the trials described in the Book of the Dead. Winning wasn't just about strategy, it was about proving your worthiness to cross into Aru, the paradise of the gods. What's truly striking is how Senet blurred the lines between ritual and recreation. Egyptians believed the living could influence the dead's journey by playing the game, as if each roll of the dice sent ripples through the spiritual realm. Tomb paintings even show pharaohs like Ramesses Roman III locked in matches against invisible opponents, perhaps the gods themselves, and those ornate sets buried with the dead. They weren't just grave goods, they were passports ensuring the deceased had the skills to navigate the afterlife's challenges. The genius of Senet lies in its duality. On one level, it was a thrilling race to the finish, filled with luck and tactics. On another, it was a sacred map teaching players how to confront chaos and find order, just as the god Osiris had done. When Tutankhamun's Senet board was unearthed, still pristine after millennia, it wasn't just a game that was rediscovered. It was a testament to how deeply the Egyptians wove play into their understanding of eternity. To hold one of those ancient pawns today is to touch a civilization's hope, that even in the face of the unknown, the right moves could light the way home. While Senet guided souls through the underworld, another Egyptian game, Mehen, coiled itself around something far more primal: the eternal battle between light and darkness. Dating back to 3000 BCE, Mehen's spiral board wasn't just a playing field. It was a scaled representation of the serpent god himself, wrapping protectively around Ra's solar bark as it navigated the treacherous 12 hours of night. Unlike the solitary journey of Senet, this was a team effort, with 6 players maneuvering lion-shaped pieces as defenders of the sun god, fending off chaos in a ritualized echo of the cosmos's daily rebirth. The game's design was a marvel of symbolism. The spiral, etched onto stone or painted across wooden slabs, mirrored the coiled serpent Mehen, who in myth shielded Ra from the apocalyptic serpent Apep. Each turn, players advanced their pieces inward toward the center, a miniature reenactment of Ra's voyage through the underworld, where every successful move pushed back the encroaching void. The lions weren't arbitrary either. They echoed Mehen's role as a guardian, their claws and fangs standing in for the divine forces that kept darkness at bay. Even the dice, often simple knucklebones, carried weight. Rolling a favorable number meant your lion had struck a blow against chaos itself. What's remarkable is how Mehen's rules blurred the sacred and the social. While Senet was deeply personal, Mehen required cooperation, reflecting the Egyptian belief that Ra's survival depended on collective effort. Tomb paintings show nobles and priests huddled around the board, their moves synchronized like a celestial dance. Losing wasn't just a defeat, it risked symbolically weakening the sun god's defenses. Some scholars argue the game vanished from records after the Old Kingdom, not because it fell out of favor, but because its ritual purpose grew too potent. A game that literally held the fate of the cosmos in its twists might have been deemed too dangerous for casual play. The legacy of Mehen lingers in the quietest details. Fragments of boards found in burial sites often show wear at the center, as if players lingered there, savoring the moment of victory, or perhaps praying for Ra's safe passage. Unlike Senet, which prepared individuals for the afterlife, Mehen was a communal vow to keep the world turning. When you trace your finger along the spiral of a reconstructed Mehen board today, you're not just following a game path. You're retracing humanity's oldest plea, that dawn will always follow the longest night. In the bustling markets of Tenochtitlan, where the air hummed with the chatter of merchants and the clatter of obsidian blades being traded, another sound rose above the chaos, the rattle of beans hitting a wooden board. This was Patolli, the Aztec game of chance and cosmic reckoning, where every roll held stakes far higher than wealth. Played on a cross-shaped board painted with vivid dyes, Patolli wasn't just a pastime. It was a mirror of the universe itself, its 52 squares echoing the sacred Aztec calendar cycle. To play was to step into a living ritual where the boundaries between game and destiny blurred into one. The rules were deceptively simple yet charged with meaning. Players would toss black or white beans, each marked with holes like tiny constellations, onto the board, their landing positions determining how far to move polished jade or turquoise pieces. But the real tension came from the wagers. Bets weren't just gold or crops, they could include a player's own freedom, with historical accounts describing nobles gambling themselves into slavery over a single reckless game. Imagine the weight of that moment, the beans skittering across the board, the onlookers holding their breath, knowing the next throw might rewrite a life. Beneath the thrill of risk, though, lay a deeper symbolism. The cross-shaped board wasn't arbitrary, it mirrored the four cardinal directions, sacred to Aztec cosmology, with the center representing the axis of the world. Moving pieces along the path wasn't just about winning. It was a reenactment of the sun god Tenochtitlan's daily journey across the sky, a delicate dance between order and chaos. Even the 52 squares held meaning, matching the number of years in the Aztec calendar cycle, after which the world was believed to teeter on the brink of annihilation unless renewed by sacred fire. What made Patolli truly extraordinary was how it embodied the Aztec worldview. Life, like the game, was a balance of skill and divine whim. The beans, random yet patterned, were like the whims of the gods, unpredictable but never meaningless. And just as the Aztecs performed rituals to keep the cosmos in motion, players saw their bets as offerings, a way to tempt fate into favor. When Spanish conquistadors arrived, they were horrified by Patolli's stakes, not realizing they were witnessing more than gambling. They were seeing a culture's way of wrestling with the very nature of existence. To hold a Patolli bean today is to touch a philosophy. This wasn't just a game. It was a microcosm of a world where every decision, every risk, was a thread in the fabric of the cosmos. The board may be silent now, but its message lingers. In the Aztec mind, play wasn't an escape from reality. It was a way to dance with it. Moving from the ritualized chaos of Aztec Patolli, we arrive at the crisp, calculated grid of Ludus Latrunculorum, the Roman Empire's answer to chess, but with a twist. Played on a grid of squares, often scratched into marble or etched onto wooden tablets, this wasn't just a game. It was a battlefield in miniature where every move drilled soldiers in the art of war. Picture a legionary crouched over the board during a lull in campaigning, his fingers hovering over pieces carved like infantry and cavalry, plotting strategies that would soon be tested in blood and dust. The rules of Ludus Latrunculorum were deceptively simple, yet packed with tactical depth. Two players faced off, each maneuvering their pieces, called latrones, or brigands, across the board, aiming to trap their opponent's stones between two of their own. But here's where it got brutal. Captured pieces weren't just removed, they were symbolically annihilated, mirroring the Roman military's unforgiving approach to conquest. Unlike modern chess, where pawns might be sacrificed for greater gain, every loss in Latrunculorum was a stark reminder of battlefield reality. one misstep could collapse an entire flank. What made this game extraordinary was how it mirrored Rome's military doctrine. The board wasn't just a playing field, it was a sandbox for teaching flanking maneuvers, supply line disruption, and the importance of holding high ground. Historians believe centurions used it to train recruits in spatial control, the same skills needed to outmaneuver Germanic tribes or Carthaginian armies. Even the pieces themselves whispered of hierarchy. Some scholars suggest larger stones represented officers, their capture a lesson in the vulnerability of leadership. But Ludus Latrunculorum wasn't just about violence, it encoded Rome's obsession with order. The grid's symmetry reflected the disciplined ranks of a legion, while the capture rules reinforced the cold logic of Roman law, no mercy for the outmaneuvered. Yet paradoxically, the game also reveals Rome's softer side. Fragments of boards have been found in women's quarters and taverns, proving it crossed social boundaries. A fresco in Pompeii even shows two women engrossed in play, their rivalry a quiet defiance of the era's gender norms. The legacy of this game lingers in the unlikeliest places. When medieval Europeans adapted it into Brandub and Hnefatafl, they unknowingly preserved Roman military thinking and those stark capture rules. They echo in modern strategy games where territory control still decides virtual wars. To hold a replica Latrunculorum piece today is to grasp a fragment of Rome's genius, their ability to turn even leisure into a tool for empire. The board may be silent now, but its lessons shout across the centuries. Victory favors not just the strong, but the cunning. Stormy seas, flickering firelight, and the clatter of carved wooden pieces. This was the world of Hnefatafl, the Viking game of kings and conquests. Played across Scandinavia as early as 400 CE, this wasn't just a pastime for longships' crews. It was a brutal, beautiful dance of strategy where one side, outnumbered and encircled, fought for survival against overwhelming odds. Picture this, a chieftain hunched over a checkered board, his fingers hovering over a polished bone piece representing the king, while his opponent's warriors closed in like a tightening noose. Hnefatafl wasn't just a game, it was a rehearsal for real-life raids where every move could mean the difference between glory and a watery grave. The rules were as unforgiving as a North Sea winter. Played on grids ranging from 9 by 9 to 19 by 19 squares, the game pitted a king and his defenders against a swarm of attackers, often at a 2-to-1 disadvantage. The king's goal, escape to the board's edge, symbolizing safe passage home. The attacker's mission, trap him at all costs, mirroring the ambushes Vikings faced or planned on foreign shores. Pieces moved like rooks in chess, straight across the grid, but captures required flanking an enemy between two of your own, a brutal nod to the Viking tactic of surrounding foes. What made Hnefatafl unique was its asymmetry. Unlike chess's balanced armies, this game forced players to think like underdogs or aggressors, teaching lessons no battlefield could afford to overlook. Dig deeper and the game reveals Viking culture's stark realities. The king wasn't all-powerful, he was vulnerable, reliant on his huskarl's loyalty, just as real Viking leaders depended on their crews during raids gone awry. Historical accounts suggest chieftains used Hnefatafl to test warriors' strategic minds, favoring those who could plot escape routes through enemy lines. Archaeology backs this up. Boards have been found in graves of military leaders, their pieces arranged mid-game, as if death were just another opponent to outmaneuver. Even the board's design held meaning. Some excavated sets feature central squares marked with interlocking spirals, a possible nod to Yggdrasil, the world tree, framing the king's struggle as a cosmic battle between order and chaos. Contrast Hnefatafl with chess and the differences shout volumes. Chess is a duel of equals, two mirrored armies clashing on neutral ground. Hnefatafl It's the desperate scramble of a raiding party caught in an alien landscape where survival hinges on cunning, not fair play. Chess rewards patience. Hnefatafl demanded adaptability, the same trait that let Vikings pivot from traders to warriors in a heartbeat. And while chess pieces have fixed roles, Hnefatafl's simpler stones reflected Viking pragmatism. In battle, titles mattered less than action. What's haunting is how Hnefatafl's legacy endured. When Christianity reached Scandinavia, the game didn't vanish, it evolved. Some boards were repurposed for chess, the old warrior king replaced by a pious monarch. But in Iceland, where Viking traditions clung tight, Hnefatafl survived well into the 18th century, a whispered echo of ancestors who saw life as one long, glorious gamble. Today, when you recreate this game, you're not just moving pieces, you're stepping into the mind of a people who turned survival into an art form, where every escape was a saga waiting to be sung. Black stones and white stones clatter onto a grid of 19 by 19 lines, simple, stark, yet concealing depths no other board game has ever matched. This is Go, born in China over 4,500 years ago, where every empty intersection hums with possibility. The rules are deceptively sparse. Place your stones to claim territory, surround your opponent's pieces to capture them. But beneath this simplicity lies a universe of strategy so vast. It's been said that more possible Go games exist than atoms in the observable cosmos. Imagine that a game where even the gods might struggle to foresee every outcome. Go's brilliance lies in its duality. Each move balances attack and defense, chaos and order, mirroring the Taoist principle of yin and yang. The board becomes a living meditation on harmony. Black stones don't obliterate white, they dance with them, shaping shared spaces where both forces coexist. Confucian scholars revered Go for this very reason, seeing in its grids a lesson in patience and foresight. A master player might spend minutes or hours pondering a single move, not just to win, but to align with the game's deeper rhythm. Historical texts describe Tang dynasty ministers playing Go to cultivate wisdom, treating each match as a mirror for governance. Rash moves bred disaster, while deliberate ones built enduring power. But Go's legacy extends far beyond philosophy. In the 20th century, this ancient game became the ultimate benchmark for artificial intelligence. When IBM's Deep Blue conquered chess in 1997, Go remained untouchable, its astronomical possibilities defying brute force computation. It wasn't until 2016 that AlphaGo, an AI developed by DeepMind, defeated world champion Lee Sedol, using neural networks to mimic human intuition. The shockwaves reverberated across tech and tradition alike. Here was a 4-millennia-old game teaching machines to think creatively, proving that Go's complexity wasn't just mathematical, it was profoundly, beautifully human. What makes Go timeless isn't just its strategic depth, it's how the board becomes a canvas for the player's mind. Unlike chess with its hierarchical pieces, Go's egalitarian stones grant infinite freedom, every game a fresh universe waiting to be shaped. Even the terminology whispers of cosmic scale. Players speak of invading territories or making living shapes, as if the stones were colonies on some uncharted planet. And perhaps they are. To sit before a Go board is to stare into the abyss of possibility, where every decision ripples across generations, just as those first players in Bronze Age China intended. Their stones still speak to us, not just across continents, but across time itself. Bamboo sticks clatter onto a lacquered board, their fall dictating not just the movement of carved wooden pieces, but the very whispers of the ancestors. This was Liubo, the Han Dynasty's enigmatic game of chance and spirit communication, where every roll held the weight of prophecy. Dating back to 1500 BC, Liubo wasn't merely entertainment, it was a bridge between worlds, its hexagonal board a conduit for messages from the unseen. Players would cast 6 bamboo sticks or ivory dice, their markings determining how to maneuver their pieces across the board's intricate paths, but the real stakes were far beyond the material. Each throw was believed to carry the voices of long-departed kin, their guidance shaping the game's outcome and perhaps the player's fate. The rules of Liubo remain shrouded in mystery, pieced together from fragmented texts and tomb paintings. What we do know is hauntingly symbolic. The board, often divided into 12 sections, mirrored the Chinese zodiac and lunar calendar, suggesting a cosmic dimension to the gameplay. Moves weren't just tactical, they were divinatory. Landing on certain spaces might signify blessings or warnings, while capturing an opponent's piece could symbolize overcoming ancestral displeasure. Some scholars argue the 6 sticks represented the 6 directions: north, south, east, west, heaven, and earth, framing each match as a microcosm of universal balance. But Liubo's true power lay in its shamanistic roots. Han Dynasty rituals often involved the game as a medium for contacting spirits, with shamans using the stick's falls to interpret divine will. Imagine the scene: incense curling through dim temple air, players' hands trembling as they cast the sticks, waiting for a sign. Tomb murals depict nobles playing Liubo alongside ethereal figures, suggesting the dead themselves might join the game. One famous set, discovered in a noblewoman's tomb, included pieces shaped like mythological beasts, guardians meant to escort messages between realms. What makes Liubo extraordinary is how it blurred the line between pastime and sacrament. Unlike Senet or Patolli, which prepared players for afterlife journeys, Liubo offered something more immediate: a dialogue with the past. When a player rolled the sticks, they weren't just testing luck. They were pleading for clarity, seeking answers in the rattle of bamboo. The game's decline by the Tang dynasty wasn't due to obsolescence but fear. Its potency in channeling spirits grew too unsettling even for emperors. Today, Liubo's legacy lingers in the unlikeliest places. Modern archaeologists still debate whether its board design influenced early Chinese star maps, and some Taoist rituals echo the stick-casting techniques. To hold a replica Liubo stick is to grasp a civilization's yearning, to believe that even in life's chaos, the ancestors might still have the final move. On a sun-baked courtyard in ancient India, 2 strategists lean over a board divided into 64 squares, their hands hovering not over dice but over carved ivory pieces, each one a miniature battalion waiting for orders. This is Chaturanga, the 600 CE ancestor of chess, where every move isn't just a tactic, but a reflection of the battlefield itself. Unlike modern chess's abstract warfare, Chaturanga's pieces were explicit echoes of Gupta Empire armies: elephants smashing through infantry, chariots flanking enemies, and the king, not just a piece to protect, but the literal prana or life force of the entire force. Lose him and the army didn't just surrender, it ceased to exist. The genius of Chaturanga lies in how it mirrored India's military and social hierarchies. Each piece was a cast in motion. The rook, originally a chariot ratha, represented the elite warriors who fought from mobile platforms. Knights were cavalry ashva, prized for their speed and flexibility. But the most telling piece was the bishop, not a religious figure, but the Goja or war elephant, the tank of its era, capable of trampling entire formations. Even pawns had a grim realism. They were Patolli, the foot soldiers who formed the empire's expendable backbone. This wasn't just a game, it was a societal ledger where every role on the battlefield had its place on the board. Yet Chaturanga's deepest secret wasn't its realism, it was its spiritual dimension. The king wasn't merely a target. His position at the board's center reflected the Hindu concept of the Chakravartin, the ideal ruler whose righteousness maintained cosmic order. Losing him didn't just mean defeat, it symbolized adharma, the collapse of moral balance. Historical texts describe kings playing Chaturanga before battles, treating it as both a tactical drill and a divination tool. A poorly defended king might prompt delays in marching, as if the game had revealed the gods' disapproval. The game's evolution into chess is a tale of cultural diffusion with a twist. When Chaturanga spread to Persia as Shatranj, the elephants became viziers, reflecting Persian bureaucracy. In Europe, the vizier morphed into the queen, but only after centuries of her moving just one square at a time. The irony, India's original game gave the weakest piece the most power, while medieval Europe, with its cult of chivalry, turned it into a powerhouse. Yet through every transformation, the core remained: war as a dance of minds where strategy could triumph over sheer force. To play Chaturanga today is to witness the birth of a global phenomenon. But more than that, it's a window into a world where war, spirituality, and social order weren't just topics for discussion. They were realities etched onto a checkered board. The pieces may have changed names over the centuries, but their shadows still move across every chess set, whispering of an era when the line between game and destiny was razor-thin. Across the sun-baked earth of ancient Africa, another kind of battle unfolded not with swords or stones, but with seeds. Mancala, dating back to 700 CE but likely far older, transformed simple holes dug into the ground into a vivid lesson in survival. Picture this: two players crouched over a wooden board or hollowed-out pits in the dirt, their hands sweeping smooth river stones or cowrie shells from one depression to the next in a rhythmic dance known as sowing. But this wasn't just a game of counting. Every move mirrored the agricultural heartbeat of the continent, where the careful distribution of seeds meant the difference between famine and feast. The rules were as intuitive as they were profound. Players took turns picking up all the seeds from one pit and planting them one by one into subsequent holes, counterclockwise around the board. If your last seed landed in an empty pit on your side, you captured all the seeds opposite, a moment echoing the triumph of a well-timed harvest. But here's where it got strategic. Skilled players didn't just react. They planned moves ahead, anticipating droughts, empty pits, and windfalls captures, turning each match into a microcosm of village resource management. The board itself was a metaphor: 2 rows of 6 pits representing fields, with larger scoring pits at either end like communal granaries waiting to be filled. Deeper still, Mancala's symbolism rooted itself in Africa's cyclical worldview. The endless redistribution of seeds mirrored seasonal planting and rainfall patterns, teaching players that prosperity wasn't hoarded, it flowed. In some cultures, the stones represented ancestors' wisdom, their movement a dialogue between generations. Ethnographers recorded elders in Ghana using Mancala to settle land disputes, the board's balance reflecting fair division. Other traditions linked it to cosmic cycles. The Borana people of Kenya aligned their gameplay with lunar phases, treating each round as a celestial dialogue. What set Mancala apart was its universality. Unlike royal games confined to elites, this was the people's pastime. Arab traders carried it to Asia, where it became kung-kak. Enslaved Africans brought it to the Americas, where it survived as weri. Through every iteration, the core remained, a reminder that strategy and generosity weren't opposites. To play Mancala wasn't just to compete, it was to rehearse the oldest human lesson, that true abundance grows when shared. Imagine 2 philosophers in an Athenian courtyard, their fingers hovering over a grid of black and white stones, not just playing a game, but debating the very fabric of society. This was Patolli, the ancient Greek precursor to chess, where every capture wasn't just a tactical victory, but a metaphor for the delicate balance between freedom and control. Dating back to 500 BC, Patolli's rules were deceptively simple. Players moved their pieces orthogonally like rooks in chess, aiming to sandwich an opponent's stone between 2 of their own to remove it from the board. Yet beneath this straightforward mechanic lay a profound commentary on power, one that would inspire Plato himself to compare life to a game where citizens, like pieces, must navigate invisible walls. The brilliance of Patolli was in its duality. On one level, it was a brutal exercise in spatial dominance, teaching strategies later echoed in Roman Latrunculorum and modern checkers. But for Greek thinkers, the board became a microcosm of their city-states. Plato's Republic famously likened society to a game where individuals, like petai pieces, could only move freely within the constraints of justice, a clever nod to the way the game forced players to balance aggression with caution. One ill-considered move, and your piece could be crushed between opposing forces, just as a citizen might falter without virtue's guidance. Archaeology reveals how deeply petai permeated Greek culture. Vases from the 5th century BCE show Achilles and Ajax hunched over a petai board during the Trojan War, their game a temporary reprieve from battle, yet the imagery is pointed. Even heroes couldn't escape the game's lessons. That conflict, whether on a board or a battlefield, demanded foresight. Surviving stone boards, often etched into public steps, suggest petai was played where politics unfolded, blurring the line between leisure and statecraft. What set petai apart was its democratic ethos. Unlike Senet or the royal game of which reflected rigid cosmic hierarchies, petai's pieces were equals, their power derived purely from position. This resonated with Greek ideals where merit could triumph over birthright. A fragment from the poet Alquerque even praises a general who moves men like petai stones, implying that leadership, like gameplay, required adaptability. The game's legacy lingers in philosophy's quietest corners. When Plato wrote that life's rules must be learned like a game's, he wasn't speaking abstractly, he was invoking petai's tangible lessons. To play was to grapple with the same tensions that shaped Athenian democracy: individual ambition versus collective order, risk versus restraint. Modern reconstructions of petai boards still bear this weight. Slide a stone across their grooves today, and you're not just replicating an ancient pastime. You're retracing the footsteps of thinkers who saw, in a handful of polished pebbles, the blueprint for civilization itself. Barely a whisper separates a sacred grove from a slaughter ground, a truth the Celtic Tafl games understood all too well. Across the misty highlands of Ireland and the rugged coasts of Wales, warriors and druids hunched over boards not merely to pass time, but to rehearse the sacred geometry of survival. Brandub, the most revered variant, was played on a 7x7 grid, its deceptively simple surface humming with coded meaning. At the center stood the king, a single piece representing not just a leader, but the heart of the grove itself. The spiritual core druids believed pulsed with the land's life force. Surrounding him, 4 defenders faced off against 8 attackers in an asymmetrical dance of blades and wits. Every move was a lesson, how to protect what mattered most when outnumbered by chaos. The brilliance of Brandub lay in its layered symbolism. The king's starting position wasn't arbitrary. It mirrored the Nemeton, the sacred clearing where druids performed rituals under ancient oaks. To lose him wasn't just defeat, it meant the desecration of hallowed ground. Historical fragments suggest high-ranking druids used these games to teach spatial sacrality, where the board became a map of invisible power lines. Defending the king meant maintaining the grove's integrity, while attackers embodied the forces of dissolution, wild beasts invading armies, even the entropy of seasons. Players internalized these stakes. Surviving manuscripts describe matches ending not with cheers but solemn nods, as if a ritual had been completed. Archaeology reveals how deeply Brandub penetrated Celtic life. Boards carved into standing stones at Tara and a main matcha show where patterns hinting at knightly play, possibly as part of warrior initiations. The pieces themselves were often crafted from blackthorn or yew, woods associated with protection and death, their shapes echoing the spearheads and shields found in chieftains' graves. Even the name Brandub whispers of duality. It translates to Black Raven, a creature both omen and ally in Celtic lore. This wasn't coincidence. Like ravens circling a battlefield, the game trained players to see patterns within chaos, to spot the moment a flank could collapse or a king could flee. What set Tafl games apart from contemporaries like Hnefatafl was their ritual fluidity. While Viking boards were rigidly symmetrical, Brandub's 7x7 grid allowed for odd-numbered tactics, reflecting the Celts' belief in magic's asymmetry. The king's escape to the edge wasn't just victory, it symbolized the safe passage of the soul to the otherworld, a theme echoed in myths like the Voyage of Bran. Some scholars argue the four defenders represented the cardinal directions, their movements invoking the Druidic cross-quarter festivals. When you replicate a Brandub match today, you're not just playing a game. You're tracing the footsteps of people who saw strategy as prayer and every captured piece as an offering to the gods of order. The legacy of these boards lingers in Ireland's landscape. At the hill of Unearth, a stone once used as a Brandub table still bears the scars of centuries of play. To touch its grooves is to feel the urgency of a civilization that knew too well. Some games weren't about winning but remembering. The king must reach the edge, the grove must endure, no matter the cost. A circle divided into 29 sections, each marked with cryptic symbols, and 4 sticks carved from mulberry wood clattering across its surface. This was Nigh Out, Korea's ancient game of fate and divine negotiation. Played as early as 500 CE, this wasn't just a pastime. It was a ritual in motion where every toss of the sticks determined not just a player's progress, but their spiritual standing. The board, often painted on cloth or etched into stone, resembled a coiled serpent or a celestial path, its circular design echoing the Korean belief in life's cyclical nature. Players would throw the sticks, flat on one side, rounded on the other, and the way they landed dictated how far to move their tokens, but the real stakes were invisible. This was a game where victory might mean winning the gods' favor, and a loss could signal ancestral displeasure. Nigh Out's connection to shamanism ran deep. Korean shamans, or mudang, used similar stick-throwing techniques in kikjori rituals to communicate with spirits. The board's circular path mirrored the journey of the soul, with certain spaces representing trials or blessings. Landing on a marked section wasn't just a gameplay mechanic, it was a moment of reckoning. Some squares forced players backward, symbolizing life setbacks or the need for atonement. Others granted leaps forward, like spiritual boons earned through devotion. Historical records describe villagers playing Nigh Out during droughts or epidemics, treating each match as a plea for intervention. The stick's randomness wasn't seen as chance, but as divine speech. A 4-flat throw called do was considered auspicious, while all-rounded sides gi might warn of impending hardship. What set Nigh Out apart was its communal role. Unlike games reserved for elites, this was a shared ritual. Families played during Lunar New Year to forecast the year ahead, while shamans incorporated it into ceremonies, reading the board like a divinatory map. The tokens themselves, often simple stones or painted wood, were believed to absorb spiritual energy, passed down through generations as talismans. Even the act of moving a piece carried weight. Sliding a token counter-clockwise could symbolize reversing misfortune, while a swift advance might mimic a prayer's ascent. The game's legacy survives in subtle ways. Modern Korean board games like Yut Nori borrow Nigh Out stick-throwing mechanics, though stripped of their sacred context. Yet in remote villages, elders still recount how Nigh Out boards were once laid at crossroads, places where the living and dead were said to meet. To play was to step into that liminal space where every move was a dialogue with forces unseen. The sticks may have fallen silent, but their message lingers. In ancient Korea, fate wasn't just faced, it was played. Under the dense canopy of the Maya rainforest, firelight flickered across a narrow wooden track. This was Puluk, a game where speed and sacrifice collided in a ritual as old as the stars themselves. Played as early as 200 CE, this wasn't just a race, it was a celestial drama carved into a board. 2 players faced off, each with 5 pieces representing warriors or gods, hurtling toward opposite ends of the track. But here's where the stakes soared. Captured pieces weren't merely removed, They were stacked beneath the captor's token, forming a growing tower of peril. The higher the stack, the greater the risk, for if your opponent's piece reclaimed that pile, every captive inside was liberated in a single, devastating reversal. Imagine the tension, a player one move from victory, their tower of captured pieces trembling like a pyramid under siege, the crowd chanting as the dice rolled. The dice themselves were works of art, carved beans or polished stones, their markings dictating movement with the randomness of divine whim. Yet Puluk's true genius lay in its cosmic symbolism. The long, narrow board wasn't just a playing field. It mirrored the Milky Way, the great white road the Maya called Sakbi. Each piece's journey, racing forward by day, retreating at night, mimicked the movement of planets and stars through the underworld, a cycle of death and rebirth central to Maya cosmology. Winning wasn't just about reaching the end, it was about aligning with the heavens' rhythm. Betting turned every match into a high-stakes covenant. Historical accounts describe nobles wagering jade, quetzal feathers, even their own freedom. But the boldest bets were intangible. A player might stake their honor on the game's outcome, believing the gods themselves arbitrated through the dice. Some scholars argue Puluk matches doubled as divination rituals, where the captured stacks symbolized souls navigating Xibalba, the underworld. Losing a tower wasn't just a setback, it was an omen, a sign that the gods demanded more offerings. What makes Puluk unforgettable is how it compressed the Maya universe into a wooden track. Just as their astronomers tracked Venus's retrograde loops, players watched their pieces advance and retreat, a microcosm of cosmic order. Today, descendants of the Maya still play Puluk in Guatemala's highlands, though the jade wagers are gone. Yet when those dice clatter onto the board, they still whisper an ancient truth. Life, like the game, is a gamble where even the gods hold their breath. An 8x8 grid etched into stone, its squares alternating like the rhythmic chant of a mantra. This was Ashtapada, the ancient Indian game where every roll of the dice became a step toward cosmic harmony. Born around 200 BC, this wasn't just a precursor to chess. It was a moving meditation, its board a sacred mandala mapping the universe's symmetry. Players would toss cowrie shells or wooden dice, their outcomes dictating how far to move their pieces across the grid. But the true goal wasn't merely reaching the end. It was aligning with Rita, the Vedic principle of cosmic order, where every turn mirrored the disciplined path to enlightenment. The board's design whispered of deeper truths. Those 64 squares weren't arbitrary, they echoed the 8 directions of space in Hindu cosmology, each quadrant a realm of existence. The alternating colors, often red and white, symbolized the duality of creation and destruction, Shiva's eternal dance frozen into playable form. Historical texts describe priests using Ashtapada in temple rituals, treating each game as a microcosm of the soul's journey. Landing on a red square might represent tapas, the heat of spiritual discipline, while a white one signaled purity gained through right movement. Even the dice carried weight. Their randomness wasn't seen as chance, but as the playful whims of the gods, testing a player's equanimity. What set Ashtapada apart was its fusion of strategy and spirituality. Unlike chess's warlike objectives, this game emphasized balance. Capturing an opponent's piece required encircling it completely, a metaphor for the Vedic ideal of overcoming ignorance through patient enclosure. Jain manuscripts later adapted the game, painting its grid with images of hellish realms and heavenly gates, turning each match into a morality lesson. Imagine a monk sliding a piece across such a board, his moves not just tactics but affirmations. This path leads to liberation, that one cycles back to suffering. The game's legacy lingers in unexpected places. Modern scholars note how Ashtapada's grid may have inspired the Shatranj board Persia, later adapted into chess, though stripped of its spiritual layers. Yet in rural India, traces endure. Farmers still chalk makeshift Ashtapada grids during festivals. their dice rolls a silent nod to ancestors who saw divinity in every move. To reconstruct this game today is to walk a razor's edge between play and prayer, where victory isn't measured in captured pieces, but in moments of perfect alignment when the board, the player, and the cosmos briefly breathe as one. Latrunculi wasn't just a game, it was Rome's brutal elegance distilled onto a grid. Played on a rectangular board of 8 by 12 squares, its simplicity masked a cutthroat elegance. Players maneuvered their pieces like centurions on a battlefield, aiming to trap opponents between two of their own. But here's the twist: unlike modern chess, where captured pieces vanish, Latrunculi's vanquished were left on the board as grim trophies, their empty spaces serving as warnings to those who dared advance recklessly. Every match was a microcosm of Rome's military doctrine, where encirclement meant annihilation and retreat could be as fatal as defiance. The game's genius lay in its deceptive depth. Pieces moved like rooks in chess straight lines, no diagonals, yet the goal wasn't to checkmate a king. It was domination through sheer positional suffocation. Historians note how legionaries carried portable Latrunculi boards during campaigns, their gameplay mirroring real-world tactics. Flanking maneuvers replicated the pincer movements used at Cannae, while sacrificial pieces echoed the feigned retreats that lured enemies into traps. Even the board's dimensions whispered of discipline, the 12-square length possibly symbolizing the 12 labors of Hercules, a metaphor for Rome's relentless expansion. But Latrunculi's true brutality emerged in its captures. To take an enemy piece, you didn't just outnumber it, you had to sandwich it between two of your own, mimicking the Roman tactic of surrounding foes to cut off escape. Surviving accounts describe high-stakes matches where players would bait opponents into overextending, only to spring devastating counterattacks, a lesson in patience any legate would applaud. The game even had its own Furor Latruncularis, a term for the obsessive focus it inspired, proving that for Romans, war and play were two sides of the same denarius. What set Latrunculi apart was its psychological warfare. Unlike Go's territorial harmony or Senet's spiritual journey, this was a game of cold calculation where mercy was weakness. Players often left captured pieces on the board as a taunt, their hollowed-out spaces serving as grim reminders of lost battles. Archaeologists have found boards in Pompeii with pieces still locked in these deadly embraces, frozen in time like a paused battle. To slide a Latrunculi piece today is to feel the weight of Rome's unblinking logic, where every move was a decree: adapt or be erased. Two armies face off on a grid of intersecting lines, no violence, no shouting, just the quiet tension of a game where every move could mean victory or surrender. This is Fanorona, Madagascar's masterpiece of strategy, born in the 1600s amid the island's warring kingdoms. At first glance, the rules seem simple enough. Players slide their pieces along the lines, capturing opponents by either moving straight toward them or sharply away. But here's where Fanorona reveals its genius. Unlike chess's direct strikes or Go's territorial encirclement, this game demands a dance of approach and retreat, where sometimes the deadliest move is stepping back. What made Fanorona revolutionary was its capture mechanics. In most games, you seize an opponent's piece by landing directly on it or flanking it. In Fanorona, you could capture by withdrawal, luring your enemy forward, then slipping away, leaving their piece vulnerably overextended. Picture this: your piece inches toward your opponent, threatening a direct capture, only to suddenly veer sideways, snapping up their entire line in a single motion. Historical accounts describe Malagasy nobles spending hours studying these maneuvers, treating each match as a lesson in statecraft. Because Fanorona wasn't just a game, it was a mirror of the island's delicate political fabric, where open conflict often spelled disaster, but a well-timed retreat could secure alliances. The board itself whispered of deeper meanings. Its grid often featured 33 intersections, a sacred number in Malagasy cosmology tied to the lunar calendar and ancestral veneration. The pieces, usually smooth stones or carved wood, were sometimes anointed with aromatic oils before play, blurring the line between strategy and ritual. And the game's asymmetry was telling. One side began with more pieces, not to overwhelm, but to teach the value of restraint. Kings like Andrian and Poinemarina reportedly used Fanorona to test advisors' diplomatic instincts. A player too eager to attack might be deemed unfit for negotiations, while one who mastered the art of withdrawal could rise to power. Fanorona's brilliance lay in how it redefined strength. Where European games glorified decisive clashes, this was a battle of finesse. Capturing multiple pieces in a single withdrawal move mirrored real-world tactics of ambush and feint techniques Malagasy warriors used against European colonizers centuries later. Even the game's decline carried irony. French occupiers banned it in the 1800s, recognizing its power as a tool of resistance. Today, when you play Fanorona, you're not just moving pieces. You're stepping into a world where victory isn't taken, it's lured, one careful retreat at a time. 4 polished sticks clatter onto a wooden board, their landing positions dictating not just the movement of pieces, but the fate of an entire village harvest. This is Yut Nori, Korea's ancient game of chance and community, where every throw whispers of earth, sky, and the delicate balance between them. Played since the 10th century, Yut Nori wasn't just entertainment. It was a ritualized reflection of agrarian life, its board a map of seasonal labor, and its results an omen of coming abundance or hardship. The sticks themselves were works of natural poetry. Flat on one side, rounded on the other, they were typically crafted from chestnut or birch wood, materials believed to carry the vitality of the forest. When tossed, they could land in 5 possible combinations, each with a name that echoed farming life. Do one flat side up meant a timid step forward, like the first sprouts of spring. Gi 2 flats signaled steady growth, like summer rains nourishing the fields. The most coveted throw, Yut all sticks flat, was akin to a sudden windfall, a bountiful harvest arriving early. But the rarest result, Mo all sticks rounded, was both feared and revered, representing the unpredictability of nature itself, a late frost or drought that could undo months of toil. What set Yut Nori apart was its communal spirit. Unlike solitary games of strategy, this was played in teams, often with entire villages divided into competing factions. The board, typically made of cloth or painted onto the ground, formed a looping path of 29 spaces, its circular design mirroring the endless cycle of planting and reaping. Moves weren't just about speed. Teamwork dictated when to advance recklessly or hold back, much like the collective decisions farmers made about when to sow or wait for better weather. Historical records describe matches played during Lunar New Year festivals, where the game's outcome was taken as a prophetic sign for the coming year's crops. A winning team might spark celebrations, their victory seen as a blessing from ancestral spirits. Deeper still, the board spaces encoded agricultural wisdom. Certain squares bore names like Harvest Bridge or Oxen Rest, referencing moments in the farming calendar. Landing on these wasn't just gameplay, it was a reminder of shared knowledge passed through generations. Folkloric accounts tell of elders using Yut Nori to teach children about patience, pointing out how a reckless dash forward could leave pieces vulnerable, just as rushing a harvest might spoil the grain. Even the capture mechanic held meaning. Taking an opponent's piece required sending it back to the start, echoing the harsh reality that a single pest or storm could undo a season's work. The game's legacy thrives in modern Korea, where families still gather during Seollal to play Yut Nori with handmade sticks. Yet beneath the laughter and competition, the old symbolism lingers. When those sticks tumble through the air today, they carry more than chance. They spin the story of a people who saw their lives reflected in the fall of 4 simple pieces of wood. Carved into the ivory surface of an ancient Egyptian game board, 2 twisting rows of holes spiral toward the center like the path of a wandering star. This is Tab, a game of hounds and jackals played under the watchful eyes of gods. Dating back to 1400 BC, this wasn't just a race to the finish. It was a celestial roadmap, its pegs tracking the moon's journey across the night sky. Each player wielded 5 slender pegs, one side crowned with the head of a jackal, the other a hound, plunging them into the board's 58 holes in a ritual as precise as the movements of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of time and magic. The game's design was a masterpiece of symbolic engineering. The serpentine path mirrored the moon's meandering orbit, with key holes representing lunar phases. Landing on certain spaces wasn't just tactical, it was temporal. Some Egyptologists argue the jackal's pegs symbolized Anubis guiding souls through darkness, while the hounds echoed Upuaut, the opener of ways, their movement reflecting the eternal tug between night and day. Boards discovered in tombs like King Amenemhat Roman IV feature markings resembling star charts, suggesting priests used tab not just for play, but to teach the mathematics of celestial cycles. Imagine a scribe crouched over the board, sliding pegs to predict an eclipse, their game a hidden almanac of the heavens. What made tab extraordinary was its duality. On the surface, it was a nail-biting race. Players threw sticks or knucklebones to advance, with the first to reach the center claiming victory. Yet beneath that lay a sacred calculus. The central hole, often adorned with a carving of Thoth's eye, wasn't just a goal, it was the moment of reckoning when the moon's cycle completed and fate was measured. Tomb paintings show nobles playing tab with one hand while holding an ankh in the other, as if the game itself were a key to immortality. The pegs reveal even deeper secrets. X-ray scans of excavated sets show some hollowed out, containing traces of myrrh or natron materials used in mummification. This wasn't coincidence. Just as Thoth recorded souls' deeds in the afterlife, tab's pegs may have tracked the deceased's virtues, each hole a step toward judgment. Some boards were even buried with cheat sheets, hieratic inscriptions warning players which moves please the gods and which risk divine wrath. When you hold a replica tab peg today, you're not just touching a game piece. You're grasping a fragment of a civilization that saw time not as a line, but as a spiral where every move echoed in both this world and the next. The jackals still run, the hounds still give chase, and somewhere in the silence, Thoth's moon still watches, measuring all. Awith-Laknanai's board lies under the high desert sun like a spider's web, a grid of intersecting lines where every move isn't just strategy, but alignment with the unseen threads of the universe. Played by the Zuni people since 1200 CE, this game wasn't about brute force. It was a delicate dance of balance and blockage, where players slid stone pieces along the lines, aiming to pin their opponent's tokens in place. But here's where the ordinary ended and the sacred began. The board's crisscrossing paths mirrored the Zuni concept of Hononai, the interconnected roadways linking all living things, while the pieces embodied the celestial twins, Ahayuta and Matsalama, eternal rivals whose struggles shaped creation itself. The gameplay was a lesson in cosmic harmony. Players didn't capture pieces by force, they immobilized them through precise positioning, echoing the Zuni belief that restraint, not destruction, maintained balance. Moving a piece diagonally across intersecting lines wasn't just tactical, it replicated the twins' journey across the sky, their eternal chase dictating the seasons. Historical accounts describe Zuni elders teaching children Awith-Laknanai as part of initiation rites, framing each match as a miniature enactment of the tribe's origin stories. Landing a piece on a central intersection wasn't just a winning move, it symbolized the moment when conflict gave way to equilibrium, much like the twins' eventual truce brought order to chaos. Archaeology reveals how deeply the game was woven into Zuni spirituality. Excavated boards often feature drilled holes at key intersections, possibly representing shrines where players might leave offerings mid-game. The pieces themselves, typically flat stones painted red or black, carried layers of meaning, red for the sun's fiery dominance, black for the night's patient embrace. Some sets include a single turquoise piece, believed to represent Itiwana, the Zuni middle place where all opposing forces reconcile. Imagine a player hesitating before sliding that turquoise stone, knowing its placement could realign the game's spiritual weight. What set Awith Laknanai apart was its refusal to glorify conquest. Unlike chess's checkmate or Latrunculi's annihilation, victory here came through subtle control, a philosophy mirrored in Zuni conflict resolution, where disputes were settled through mediation, not violence. Modern players who reconstruct the game often miss this nuance, focusing on the mechanics while overlooking the whispering wisdom beneath. That true power lies not in obliterating your rival, but in guiding them toward harmony. When the last piece settles on the board, the message lingers like desert rain. Every alignment, whether of stone or spirit, reshapes the world. Bao's board is more than wood. It's a living map of the Swahili coast's bustling economy, where every carved pit hums with the memory of spices, gold, and ivory changing hands. Played since 700 CE across Tanzania, Kenya, and Zanzibar, this wasn't just a game of seeds and strategy. It was a mirror of the monsoon tide trade that fueled city-states like Kilwa and Mombasa. The board, typically hollowed from a single log, features 4 rows of 8 pits, 32 in total, each representing a marketplace or trading outpost along the Indian Ocean's golden web. Players begin by sowing seeds, plucking them from a pit and distributing them counterclockwise, one by one, into subsequent depressions. But here's where the metaphor ignites. Just as merchants moved goods between ports, Bao players circulate seeds with precision, their hands reenacting the ebb and flow of medieval commerce. The rules reveal layers of economic wisdom. Capturing an opponent's seeds requires landing your last sown seed in an empty pit on their side, a move echoing the delicate timing of trade caravans arriving just as demand peaked. Certain pits, like the Kimbai, act as strategic strongholds, mirroring coastal hubs where goods were stockpiled before crossing continents. Historians note how elite players in Lamu and Pemba would chant proverbs during matches, phrases like "Empanda tezi hupata tezi," he who sows sparingly reaps sparingly, a direct nod to the risks and rewards of long-distance trade. Even the seeds themselves carried meaning. Using cowrie shells, the region's ancient currency, blurred the line between gameplay and real-world wealth. Deeper still, Bao encoded social hierarchies. Advanced variants demanded players memorize hundreds of opening sequences, much like merchants internalized complex trade routes. The game's two-phase structure, Njombo basic sowing and Mtaji advanced conquest, paralleled a trader's journey from local barter to international negotiation. Excavations in Jeed ruins uncovered Bao boards buried near market squares, their pits worn unevenly, suggesting certain depressions like key ports saw more traffic than others. To play Bao today is to trace the fingerprints of a civilization that turned commerce into art. The seeds still click like coins on a counting table, the board still hums with the ghosts of How sails on the horizon, and every move whispers the same truth. Trade wasn't just about profit. It was a dance of calculation and trust, where the right sowing could feed an entire city. Black lava stones clack against a polished wooden board, each hop a miniature conquest in the fierce silence of Konain Hawaii's ancient game of kings. Played on grids ranging from 8 by 8 to 14 by 14 squares, this wasn't just a pastime for alii, the high chiefs of the islands. It was a ruthless exercise in territorial dominance, where every move required players to leap their stones over an opponent's piece, capturing it in mid-air like a hawk snatching prey from the waves. But here's where the simplicity ended. Captured stones weren't merely removed. They were replaced by the victor's own, transforming the board into a shifting map of power, where early gains could collapse beneath a rival's relentless counterattack. The game's genius lay in its brutal elegance. Unlike chess's varied pieces or Go's expansive territories, Konain reduced strategy to pure motion. Stones could only move diagonally, and every capture demanded a follow-up jump if possible, creating chain reactions that could sweep across the board like a sudden storm. Historical accounts describe allies spending days locked in matches, their advisors watching in silence as each hop mirrored real-world dilemmas: when to expand, when to consolidate, when to sacrifice a stone to claim 3 in return. The board itself was a microcosm of Hawaii's fractured resources. Just as chiefs competed for control of fertile valleys and fishing grounds, Conine players fought over the grid's limited space, where every captured stone represented a claimed taro patch or a secured shoreline. Archaeology reveals how deeply Conine was tied to leadership training. Excavated sets from royal compounds feature boards carved from rare koa wood, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of chiefly hands. The stone's black basalt versus white coral were often harvested from sacred sites, imbuing the game with spiritual weight. Elders taught young allies that Conine's captures echoed the art of governance. A chief who couldn't anticipate 3 moves ahead would lose not just the game but the loyalty of their people. The game's endgame was especially telling. Victory came when one player couldn't make another capture, a stark lesson in resource exhaustion, whether of land, food, or allies. What set Conine apart was its unforgiving realism. Where European strategy games often glorified decisive battles, this game reflected the Pacific's harsh truths. Survival depended on adaptability. A single reckless move could leave a player's forces scattered like islands in the sea, unable to support one another. Modern players who reconstruct Conine often miss its deeper resonance, that the black and white stones weren't just opponents. They represented the balance of Pono, the Hawaiian concept of righteousness, where every action carried consequences as inevitable as the tide. To slide a Conine stone today is to touch the unyielding logic of chiefs who knew power isn't taken. It's earned one calculated leap at a time. A grid of shallow holes dug into the earth, 2 players crouched low, shifting carved wooden tokens like cattle across an invisible pasture. This is Dara, the Fulani people's ancient game of territorial wit, where every move isn't just strategy, but a reflection of nomadic life itself. Born in the Sahel around 1000 CE, Dara's 12x6 grid wasn't merely a playing field. It was a microcosm of the grazing lands Fulani herders traversed for centuries. Players took turns placing their pieces 12 per side into the grid's intersections, aiming to align 3 in a row either horizontally or vertically. But here's where the pastoral metaphor ignited. Those lines of 3 weren't just winning combinations. They represented the ultimate prize in Fulani culture, rich, uncontested pastures where cattle could thrive undisturbed. The gameplay mirrored the rhythms of herding with uncanny precision. Just as Fulani nomads guided their cattle across vast stretches of the Sahel, Dara pieces moved one space at a time along the grid's lines, mimicking the careful pacing of livestock grazing. Capturing an opponent's token required flanking it between 2 of your own, a maneuver echoing the territorial skirmishes that erupted when herders clashed over watering holes. Historical accounts describe elders teaching children Dara not just as a game, but as a lesson in resource management. Lining up 3 tokens taught the value of securing fertile ground, while losing pieces warned of the consequences of overextension. Deeper still, the board's design whispered of Fulani cosmology. The 12 intersections per side mirrored the 12 months of the year, a reminder that survival depended on seasonal awareness. Certain squares were considered blessed, much like real-world grazing spots that mysteriously remained green during drought. Players would often anoint their pieces with butter or milk before important matches, blurring the line between game and ritual. Even the capturing mechanic held layers of meaning. Removing an opponent's piece wasn't called taking, it was wuro, the Fulani word for encircling, the same term used when cattle were claimed after border disputes. What set Dara apart was its refusal to glorify hoarding. Unlike Western games where accumulating pieces meant strength, Here victory came through precise alignment, 3 in a row, no more, no less, echoing the Fulani belief that true wealth lay not in owning endless herds but in sustaining just enough. Modern versions of Dara still thrive in Nigerian villages, though the butter anointing is rare. Yet when those wooden tokens click into place today, they still carry the echoes of a people who saw their entire way of life reflected in 12 rows of dust. A square board divided into 64 spaces, black and white discs flipping in an instant reversi, seems like a modern invention, but its roots coil back through centuries, possibly even to the Roman merles boards scratched into ancient stone. Born in England in the 1800s, this game of sudden turnabouts wasn't just a Victorian pastime. It was a mirror of life's capricious nature, where dominance could crumble with a single well-placed move. The rules are deceptively simple. Players take turns placing their pieces, trapping opponents' discs between their own to flip them to their color. Yet beneath that mechanic lies a timeless truth: power is never permanent, and fortune favors those who adapt. The game's connection to Roman merles is tantalizing if debated. Merles, also known as nine men's morris, featured a grid where players aimed to form lines of 3, but some excavated boards show markings suggesting a capture mechanic, trapping an opponent's piece between 2 of your own, much like Reversi's signature flip. Imagine a legionary in Britannia crouched over a merles board scratched into a barracks wall, experimenting with this twist. Did the idea lie dormant for centuries, resurfacing in London's parlours? While no direct lineage is proven, the thematic echo is uncanny. Both games teach that control is an illusion easily overturned. Reversi's brilliance lies in its duality. On one hand, it's a mathematical exercise grandmasters can predict sequences 20 moves deep. On the other, it's a metaphor for life's unpredictability. A player might dominate the board, only to watch their lead evaporate when their opponent sneaks a piece into a corner, triggering a cascade of flips. This isn't just gameplay, it's a lesson in humility. Victorian society, with its rigid hierarchies, must have felt the sting of that message. Even the name, Reversi, whispers of upheaval. The same era that birthed the game saw revolutions in industry and thought, where old orders were constantly upended. Modern iterations like Othello, rebranded in the 1970s, amplify this symbolism. The contrasting discs evoke Shakespeare's Moor, a man caught between identities, while the game's tagline, "A minute to learn, a lifetime to master," nods to its deceptive depth. Psychologists even use Reversi to study decision-making, noting how players often fixate on short-term gains, missing the board's shifting tides. It's a flaw the Romans knew well: conquer too greedily, and your empire collapses under its own weight. To slide a Reversi disc onto the board today is to join a chain of thinkers who understood, whether in marble courtyards or gaslit drawing rooms, that the only constant is change. The pieces still flip, the corners still hold their quiet power, and the game remains a whisper across time. Dominance is fleeting, but adaptability, that's eternal. On a sunlit veranda in 17th century Java, 2 players lean over a board crisscrossed with looping lines. This is suricata, where capturing an opponent's piece isn't a straightforward strike, but a spiraling dance along curved paths. The board, divided into a 6x6 grid, seems simple at first glance, but it's the arcs connecting the corners that reveal its genius. To capture, you don't just jump over an enemy piece, you must follow these looping lines in a full circuit, your piece tracing a serpentine path before finally snatching your target. Imagine the tension. Your opponent's token sits vulnerable, but to take it, you must commit to a looping journey around the board's periphery, risking exposure to counterattacks with every step. This intricate capture mechanic wasn't just clever gameplay, it mirrored the Javanese worldview. The looping lines were more than rules, they represented the labyrinthine paths of spiritual progression, where enlightenment couldn't be seized directly. Like a seeker circling a sacred mountain, each winding capture in Surakarta echoed the cyclical nature of karma, where actions return to their source. Historians note how the game's name honors Surakarta, a Javanese court city steeped in mysticism, where rulers likely played it as both pastime and meditation. Even the board's arcs mirrored traditional batik motifs symbolizing the serpent Naga, a guardian of cosmic balance. Deeper still, Surakarta's design whispered of cyclical time. Unlike Western games with linear victory conditions, here dominance was fluid. A piece that seemed cornered could suddenly become a predator if its captor's looping path was interrupted. This mirrored Javanese philosophies of reincarnation and interconnected fate. What appeared as an end might merely be a turn in the cycle. The game's strategy reinforced this. Reckless aggression often backfired as overextended pieces became trapped in their own looping ambitions. What made Surakarta extraordinary was its refusal to separate play from parable. While chess taught war and Go mirrored territorial control, this game was a moving mandala, its arcs etching a truth into the player's hands. Every action ripples outward, every victory demands a winding journey. When you slide a piece along those curves today, you're not just playing. You're retracing the steps of thinkers who saw life itself as a board where every move, no matter how indirect, carries weight. Carved from a single slab of wood, the star-shaped board of Mu Torere isn't just a playing field, it's a map of the night sky, its 8 points stretching outward like a compass guiding Polynesian voyagers across the Pacific. Played by the Maori since the 1400s, this deceptively simple game of strategy hides a celestial secret. Each of the 8 outer pits represents a star in the Matariki cluster, the Pleiades, whose annual rising signaled the Maori New Year and dictated the rhythms of planting, fishing, and ocean navigation. At the center lies the Putahi, the meeting place where players maneuver their 4 pieces, 2 black, 2 white, not just to block their opponent, but to retrace the ancestral pathways of the stars themselves. The genius of Mu Torere lies in its dual purpose. On the surface, the rules seem straightforward. Players take turns moving their pieces along the board's arms, aiming to trap their opponent with no available moves. But beneath this mechanic hums a deeper pedagogy. Each move mirrored the way Polynesian navigators used star paths, shifting positions incrementally, anticipating obstacles, and always keeping a mental map of escape routes. Imagine a Tohunga, a Maori priest astronomer, teaching young wayfinders with this board, their fingers sliding pieces to illustrate how Matariki stars could guide a waka through uncharted waters. The black and white pieces weren't merely opponents, they embodied the balance of Rangi Sky Father and Papa Earth Mother, their interplay reflecting the harmony needed to navigate both sea and sky. Archaeological finds reveal how tightly Mu Torere was woven into Maori cosmology. Excavated boards often feature carvings of fishhooks matau or ocean waves along the edges, linking gameplay to survival. The central Putahi sometimes bore a spiral pattern, a reference to Tikor, the void from which all life emerged in Maori belief. Even the pieces carried weight. Some sets used polished Paunamu greenstone for white pieces and basalt for black, materials sacred in Maori culture. Historical accounts describe chiefs playing Mu Torere before major voyages, treating each match as both tactical exercise and omen. A well-timed trap on the board might signal clear skies ahead, while a stalemate could prompt delays until the stars realigned. What sets Mu Torere apart is its refusal to separate knowledge from play. Unlike chess's warlike hierarchy or Go's territorial conquest, this game was a living classroom. The star-shaped board forced players to think radially, just as navigators had to perceive the heavens as a sphere, not a flat plane. Capturing an opponent's piece required encircling it from multiple angles, a skill directly transferable to reading ocean currents or wind shifts. Modern scholars note how the game's optimal strategies align with traditional Polynesian star compass techniques, where direction was determined by the rise and set of key stars along the horizon. To hold a Mu Torere piece today is to grasp more than a game token. It's a fragment of a civilization that saw no divide between the practical and the sacred, where learning to outmaneuver an opponent on a wooden star was also learning to ride the waves beneath the real ones. The board may be silent now, but its arms still point outward, not just to winning positions, but to the infinite pathways of ancestors who navigated by the light of Matariki long before compasses ever existed. Diagonal lines crisscross the board like desert trade routes. This is Alquerque, where every move isn't just a step but a strike. Carved into temple floors and palace courtyards from ancient Egypt to Moorish Spain, this precursor to checkers transformed simple jumps into lessons in warfare. Players slid their pieces along intersecting lines, capturing opponents by leaping diagonally over them, a mechanic that mirrored the Abbasid Empire's most devastating battlefield tactic, the pincer movement. The game's brilliance lay in its stripped-down brutality. Unlike chess's varied units, Alquerque's pieces were equals, their power derived purely from position. A well-timed jump could trigger a chain reaction, wiping out entire rows, an echo of how Islamic generals like Khalid ibn al-Walid used flanking maneuvers to collapse enemy lines. Historians note how Abbasid military academies incorporated Alquerque into officer training, treating each match as a sandbox for teaching encirclement strategies. The board's 5x5 grid wasn't arbitrary. It compressed the chaos of battle into a digestible scale where recruits learned to spot vulnerabilities in seconds. A single misstep could leave a player's forces split, just as real armies shattered when cavalry attacked from multiple angles. Deeper still, the diagonal captures encoded a cultural revolution. Pre-Islamic Arabian warfare often relied on frontal assaults, but Alquerque's geometry demanded oblique thinking. Excavated boards from Baghdad's House of Wisdom feature marginal notes comparing certain jumps to the Battle of Yarmouk, where Muslim forces used terrain to funnel Byzantine troops into killing zones. Even the pieces told a story. Some sets used cylindrical tokens resembling the reed pens of scholar generals who planned campaigns between games. What set Alquerque apart was its merciless efficiency. Unlike Go's gradual encirclement or chess's layered hierarchy, here victory came through sudden, sweeping strikes, much like the lightning raids of Bedouin warriors. Modern reconstructions often miss the game's ruthless subtlety. To play authentically is to feel the desert's logic. Mobility trumps numbers, and sometimes the deadliest path isn't forward but sideways. When your piece arcs over an opponent's today, you're not just making a capture. You're tracing the ghost of a 1,000-year-old stratagem, one diagonal leap at a time. Scratched into the dirt floors of 19th-century Egyptian coffeehouses, Seega's grid wasn't just a game board, it was a battleground for the Nile's most precious resource, fertile land. Played on a 5x5 square grid with diagonal lines connecting the central intersections, this deceptively simple contest began with players taking turns placing their pieces, 12 white and 12 black stones, on the outer squares, leaving the center vacant like an unclaimed field awaiting the floodwaters. But what seemed like child's play quickly revealed its deeper calculus. To capture an opponent's piece, you had to flank it horizontally or vertically, pinning it between two of your own, a mechanic that mirrored the real-life clashes over irrigation canals, where farmers jostled to redirect water between their plots. The game's brilliance lay in its agricultural metaphors. Each stone wasn't merely a playing piece, it represented a dike or barrier controlling the flow of precious water. Capturing an opponent's token by surrounding it echoed the way upstream villages could steal water flow from downstream neighbors by strategically blocking canals. Historical accounts describe village elders using Seega to settle minor land disputes, letting the board's outcome dictate water rights for the season. The central intersection where all diagonal lines met wasn't just a tactical stronghold, it symbolized the Nile's main channel, the lifeline every player fought to control. Even the initial placement phase held meaning. Just as farmers negotiated field boundaries after each flood receded, players carefully positioned their stones along the edges before the real contest began. Deeper still, Seega encoded lessons in resource management. A player who greedily pursued captures might leave their own pieces scattered and vulnerable, much like a farmer who over-diverted water risked destabilizing the entire irrigation network. Conversely, a too cautious approach allowed opponents to dominate the center, the equivalent of losing prime riverside soil to rivals. The diagonal lines added another layer, representing the crisscrossing secondary canals that fed individual plots. Moving a piece along these diagonals wasn't just a clever tactic. It mimicked the way water could be diverted through smaller channels to bypass blockages. Artifacts from the era reveal how deeply the game resonated. Boards carved into limestone slabs show where patterns concentrated around the central intersections, evidence of countless struggles over this symbolic Nile. Some sets include blue painted stones likely representing water, while others use terracotta tokens shaped like sheaves of wheat. Travelers' journals describe fellahin pausing during harvest to play quick matches, their hands calloused from sickle work moving stones with the same precision they used to regulate sluice gates. To place a Seega stone today is to touch the pulse of a vanishing world. The grid may be silent, but its lines still trace the old tensions between cooperation and survival, between sharing and hoarding. Every capture whispers the same truth the Nile's farmers knew too well. Water, like victory, flows to those who position themselves wisely. Giant Chopar's board unfolds like a mystic's vision, a grid of precisely numbered squares spiraling inward, each step a trial, each misstep a plunge into the abyss. Crafted during the Mughal Empire's golden age, this 16th century game wasn't mere entertainment. It was a pilgrimage in miniature, its ladders and snakes mapping the soul's tumultuous journey through samsara, the endless cycle of rebirth. Picture this: noblemen and ascetics hunched over embroidered cloth boards, their ivory pieces inching forward not toward worldly victory, but toward moksha liberation from the karmic wheel. The role of cowrie shells dictated fate, but the real stakes were etched into the board itself. Every ladder, often labeled with virtues like truth or compassion, promised elevation, while snakes bearing names like greed or anger coiled around squares representing moral failings, ready to drag players back into the depths of existence. The game's design was a masterpiece of Jain philosophy. Unlike Western board games with linear paths to victory, Giant Chopar's spiral layout mirrored the cyclical nature of samsara, where progress was never guaranteed. Landing on square 12 might send you soaring to the heavens via the ladder of non-violence, ahimsa, only to tumble from square 56 down the serpent of ego. These weren't arbitrary punishments. They echoed the Jain belief that every action, however small, rippled across lifetimes. The highest square, often numbered 72 or 108 sacred numbers in Jain cosmology, represented enlightenment, a state so rare that some boards included only a single, fragile ladder leading there, symbolizing the near impossibility of breaking free from rebirth without perfect conduct. Historical accounts reveal how deeply Giant Chopar was woven into spiritual practice. Jain monks used it to teach lay followers about karmic consequences, their fingers tracing the board's tortuous paths as they recounted parables of souls trapped by their own delusions. One surviving set, housed in a Patan temple, features snakes carved with human faces, each a depiction of a specific demonic rebirth awaiting those who succumb to vice. The ladders, meanwhile, shimmer with inlaid lapis lazuli, their rungs labeled in Prakrit script with the names of Tirthankaras, the enlightened beings who'd escaped samsara. Playing wasn't just a lesson, it was an act of devotion, each roll of the shells a moment to reflect on one's own karmic ledger. What set Giant Chopar apart was its brutal honesty. Unlike modern snakes and ladders, where chance dominates, the Mughal original forced players to confront uncomfortable truths. A single misstep landing on the snake of deceit could undo 20 squares of progress, mirroring Jainism's teaching that lifetimes of virtue could be undone by one moment of weakness. The game's asymmetry was deliberate. While ladders were scarce and steep, snakes lurked everywhere, their jaws gaping from seemingly innocuous squares. This wasn't pessimism, it was a call to vigilance. Even the pieces carried weight. Some sets used crystal tokens, their transparency symbolizing the soul's purity, easily clouded by attachment. When the British adapted Giant Chopper into the children's game we know today, they stripped away its spiritual core, replacing karma with simple luck. But the original still whispers across centuries. To play it now is to feel the weight of choices stretching beyond the board, where every move isn't just a step forward, but a reckoning with the self. The ladders still beckon, the snakes still wait, and the path to liberation remains as narrow and as steep as ever. Patchessy's board sprawls like a royal courtyard, a symmetrical cross adorned with blooming circles, each step whispering of empire and intrigue. Born in India's Gupta Empire around 500 CE, this wasn't just a game, it was a political theater in wood and die, where every throw of cowrie shells dictated the fate of pawns maneuvering like courtiers vying for a king's favor. The board's cross-shaped design, with its 4 arms radiating from a central square, wasn't merely aesthetic. It mirrored the Chaucer Yantra, an ancient cosmological diagram representing the 4 directions of the universe, with the center as the axis of power, the throne itself. Players didn't just race their pieces home, they reenacted the perilous dance of dynastic ambition, where a single misstep could see you exiled to the board's outer paths, scrambling to re-enter the royal court's inner circle. The pieces, often elaborate figurines of elephants or warriors, carried layers of meaning. Moving them along the flower like circles wasn't random. It echoed the Darbar rituals of Indian kingdoms, where nobles advanced toward the throne in measured steps, their proximity to the center reflecting their influence. Capturing an opponent's piece by landing on its space wasn't called a kill but a gat, a term evoking the overthrow of rival factions. Even the shells used as dice held royal connotations. 6 cowries, their open mouths facing up, determined movement, much like the whims of fate or a capricious monarch, dictated a courtier's rise or fall. Historical accounts describe Emperor Akbar's obsession with Patchesy, playing life-sized versions in his palace courtyards using enslaved people as living pieces, their movements dictated by throws of gemstone-studded shells. The message was clear: power was a game and the board was your kingdom. Deeper still, Patchesy's mechanics encoded cosmic truths. The central home square, often painted gold or red, symbolized moksha, spiritual liberation, but also the throne's inviolability. To reach it, players had to navigate the board's outer paths, where shortcuts and traps mimicked the unpredictability of royal favor. Landing on a marked space might catapult you forward like a sudden promotion, while others forced agonizing retreats, echoing the fall of disgraced ministers. The game's very name, derived from the Hindi Patchais 25, referenced the highest possible shell throw, a number sacred in Hindu numerology as the count of tattvas, or cosmic principles governing existence. Every match was a lesson in dharma and destiny, where luck and strategy intertwined like the threads of a king's robe. What set Patchesy apart was its democratic duality. While kings played it as a microcosm of rule, commoners saw it as a mirror of life's fragility. Folk tales recount peasants betting their harvests on Patchesy matches, trusting the cowries to decide their fortunes as blindly as they trusted monsoons. The board's cross and circle design even influenced Indian architecture. Temple floors in Rajasthan bear Patchesy-like patterns, inviting devotees to walk the path of fate. Today, when you slide a piece across a Patchesy board, you're not just playing a game. You're retracing the footsteps of emperors and farmers alike, all bound by the same truth. Whether throne or field, life's moves are half strategy, half surrender to the toss of the shells. From the spiraling pathways of Mehen mimicking Ra's nightly struggle to the monsoon season rhythms encoded in Bao's sewing mechanics, these ancient games were never just diversions. They were living repositories of belief, survival, and cosmic order. Each board carved a civilization's deepest fears and highest aspirations into wood and stone. The Aztecs saw the capricious hand of the gods in the clatter of Patolli beans, while Viking warlords distilled the chaos of raids into Hnefatafl's asymmetrical battlefields. Even the simplest rules held multitudes. The Fulani's Dara taught nomadic children to balance scarce resources, and Korea's Nai out-transformed stick throws into dialogues with ancestors. These games were mirrors reflecting societies where play and prayer shared the same breath. Perhaps the most striking revelation isn't just how these games encoded meaning, but how those meanings still resonate. When modern players reconstruct Senet, they aren't merely moving pawns, they're retracing the Egyptian soul's journey through Juwat. Rolling the cowrie shells in Pachisi today still carries the weight of a Gupta emperor's courtly gamble. Even the algorithmic beauty of Go, now used to train AI, preserves the Taoist dance of balance its creators revered 4 millennia ago. These boards remind us that our ancestors didn't separate life into compartments of work, war, and leisure. For them, every action, whether planting seeds or placing stones, was threaded with purpose. So as we close this journey through 30 windows into lost worlds, I'd love to hear, which game's hidden meaning caught you off guard? Was it the Celts turning Brandub into a sacred grove's defense, or the Maya mapping the Milky Way onto Puluk's narrow track? Drop your thoughts below. This is the kind of mystery that only gets richer when we unravel it together. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into history's forgotten corners, don't forget to subscribe. Who knows, the next video might just reveal secrets hidden in plain sight, another roll of the dice, another move in humanity's oldest games.